So I went to the library the other day. Big surprise there, right? I started picking up some DVDs, like, oh, maybe I'll check this out, maybe I'll check this out, and thinking, oh, maybe I'll just check out one or two, and then I'll put the rest back. I actually ended up checking out Inglourious Basterds, Dead Poets Society, The Painted Veil, and Memento. Now, so far, I've only watched Inglourious Basterds and Dead Poets Society. Inglourious Basterds, wow, that was really good. I was expecting a ridiculous, albeit very, very graphic bloodbath, because if you've seen Kill Bill, you know, Quentin Tarantino gets a little... I'm not going to go into it. But actually, it wasn't as bad graphically as I thought it would be. I'm not really a queasy type, you know, it takes a lot for me to kind of, or whatever. There were a couple scenes that kind of made me cringe, but at the same time, it's almost very black humor, where it's kind of making fun of itself in a way, over the top, and they don't focus on a lot of the carnage. They kind of, sometimes they just show it briefly. For example, there's parts where they show them scalping these Nazis. It's kind of gross, but after the first 2 or 3, you kind of get used to it in a way, because it's just, there isn't, I don't know, the grossness factor kind of wears off after a couple minutes. But I gotta say, I heard all this great stuff about Christoph Waltz in this movie, and his acting exceeded my expectations. I was amazed. It was basically the same kind of almost transfixation on the screen, even though it's just can't look away, kind of like Ralph Fiennes in Schindler's List. They're a similar character in a way. They're both very, very cruel in the way that they do things, and they're not necessarily killing people left and right every 2 seconds, though they do that a lot, especially in Schindler's List. But they also have the side of them that lets people live, and they kind of toy with them, and they know exactly what's going on, but they pretend like it's not, so they kind of torture the other person in a way, kind of like, pretending to be all aloof and asking these weird questions that could only mean that they know what's up, and it's actually really scary, and he was just outstanding. I was scared of him. Like, he was really, really, like, so creepy. So charming, and that's the thing. They're so charming, but they're so vile. It's, ugh. And Brad Pitt surprised me. He was actually entertaining with his ridiculous southern accent. I guess Tennessean, is that a word? Instead of saying Nazi, he's saying Nazi, and Italian. It was very entertaining. That was one of my favorite movies. It was really good. Dead Poets Society. I was surprised by this one because I was looking through the shelves and I saw Dead Poets Society, and I thought, I've heard that name before, but I didn't really know what it was about at all. So I read the back and I was like, this sounds like it could be good. I mean, I heard that it was really good, and, Robin Williams is in it, and it's a 1989 movie or whatever, so I figured, maybe it's good. I don't know. Checked it out, and I started watching it, and to my surprise, very, very, very young Robert Sean Leonard. You will recognize him as Dr. Wilson from House. He's only 20 years old in this movie, and I was like, oh my god, because I saw his face and I thought, I totally know that kid. And also, to my surprise, extremely, young, like, kind of chubby face, almost chubby face, teenager looking Ethan Hawke. Ethan Hawke, he looks like himself, but he doesn't. Like, his face is very soft compared to the way it is now. And it was actually really good. It's one of my favorite movies now. Robin Williams' character, he plays this English teacher, and both Robert Sean Leonard plays Neil, and Ethan Hawke plays Todd. They're two of his students. They go to this private boarding school for boys in the 50s. It doesn't focus so much on the teacher, Robin Williams. I mean, he's a big part of it, but it focuses mostly on the boys themselves. And the Dead Poets Society is actually this club that Mr. Keating had been in when he was a student at the same school, and he explains it to some of the boys who are really into the class, poetry-wise. He tells them about this Dead Poets Society, which is where just a bunch of guys would go out in the middle of the night, go to this cave that was away from the school, and they would read poetry and that kind of stuff. And it sounds kind of dumb, but at the same time, it was kind of like a good thing, because these boys, like, most of them are being pressured to become either doctors, lawyers, architects, those kind of things, and especially Neil, which is Robert Sean Leonard's character, his father doesn't really support him in anything except for things that'll help him become, or go to medical school. He says, you're going to do this and this, and you're going to go to Harvard and go to medical school, and you're going to be a doctor or whatever. He doesn't really have any freedom. He makes him, at the beginning of the year, he makes him get rid of some of the extracurriculars. He tells him he has to drop out of the school newspaper, even though it's obvious that Neil wants to be on the school newspaper because he likes it, but he does it because his father makes him. This Dead Poets Society is kind of an outlet for their, creativeness or whatever to go out, and Robin Williams kind of helps them in class by having a non-conventional class, kind of. They go about poetry in a way, instead of focusing on the way things are structured or the type of techniques the person used and stuff. They focus more on the feeling of the poem, kind of. Not really, they don't focus on that. They just feel the poem. They read poems. They live and breathe poems. And it's actually really, really beautiful. I opened myself to a new way to look at poetry as well. So it definitely affected the way that I look at poetry. Because, poetry, a lot of people are like, poetry. But if you think of it in a way that's not super structured and annoying, like in school, where like, oh, the iambic pentameter and like, oh, blah, 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 structure, it can be really beautiful. So I highly recommend both Inglourious Basterds and Dead Poet Society. If you're kind of more of a queasy side, you don't really like highly emotional, like Holocaust type movies, Inglourious Basterds is not as bad as Schindler's List in that term, people dying, like a lot of people dying or anything like that. But it's still pretty heavy emotionally. And Dead Poet Society actually ended up being pretty emotional too, but I highly recommend it for anyone who, even if you hate poetry, if you love poetry, it can either reinforce the way you look at things or change the way you look at poetry in the future. So go watch these movies. You will not regret it.